Hello, everyone. I am Richard Carey, and this is the Bcamp podcast. And today we have with us Rushi Ganmukhi, who is the founder and CEO of Bola AI. So we're so glad to have you with us today, Rushi. Thank you for joining us.
Sure thing. Likewise, Richard. Thanks for having me.
And maybe to start out, can you tell us a little bit about Bola AI? What do you guys do? Uh, the story.
Yeah, for sure. So we are in the voice AI space. Great space to be in currently. Focused on the dental industry. Not an industry a lot of people think about a lot in terms of software and technology. And that's really why we're there. There's a lot of outdated systems, hard to do processes, a lot of documentation, you'd be surprised, that needs to be done in a dental office. And so where we come in is we voice enable some of their procedures, their clinical notes, allowing them to do it, of course, over their voice without the help of an assistant, leading to more revenue, of course, insurance reimbursement, all those good things. And that's really the focus of our company, voice AI and dental.
Awesome. I love it. I love how AI is just infiltrating every single industry. But you guys were doing this before it was cool. But
Yeah, we started back in around like 2018. I think we jokingly call it like the first wave. I know there were like 10 other waves before then. But in our lifetimes, really, when like Alexa and Google Home came out and everyone was trying to voice enable everything, like you could order Ubers over Alexa and Domino's Pizza over Alexa, and wasn't a great use of the technology. And I think now with all the advances and LLMs, life has become a lot easier and product has become a lot easier.
nice. I love that. And maybe tell us just a little bit about your personal story. How did you end up starting a company?
Yeah.
What does your journey look like?
Yeah, so I was hardcore in my undergraduate. I did electrical engineering, like hardware, chips, LEDs, solid state research, like the hardcore stuff. And then I never worked a day in that industry, so it was very difficult. But I came out of that, started as a software engineer, and just absolutely loved it right out of college. Just like it blew my mind that you could do so many cool things at the touch of your fingers. Like it's for anyone who's not a software engineer who became a software engineer, it's a fabulous feeling. So got into that, then kind of the normal path from there. Wanted to get deeper in a few areas, machine learning. So went back for my master's. Spent a few years doing research at MIT, some projects for the FDA and DoD. And then right around that time, like deep learning and neural nets came out. And I quickly saw the coolest things weren't happening in academia. They were happening at like Facebook and DeepMind and like all the big companies, labs and startups. And I always knew I wanted to start something. My dad was an entrepreneur in the hardware space. He'll tell you what he does is harder than what I do. And came out of that and really saw the need for voice products in the wider healthcare market, and then dialed it into the dental space. So coming into it as from an engineering background.
Cool. I love that. That'll be relevant to a lot of our listeners here who are doing
Exactly.
software development and machine learning. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'd be curious to hear about you're in a small growing company. How do you think about growing your team? How do you think about hiring developers? What do you look for with developers? Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so we're always looking for great developers, and right now it's difficult because the new technology has come out, and whoever is trained on the new technology is going to big companies, extremely well-funded startups. It's hard to compete in that area, and so we're looking for developers. We love people from non-traditional software backgrounds, people who have worked in other areas who came into software. There's always something really interesting, and they always have a very interesting point of view. It always pays you back really nicely. So that's one thing we look for. Of course, I think breadth of projects is really nice, having worked on different, not necessarily different stacks, but within different companies who do different products. And then I think depth is probably the most crucial thing and hard thing to find is, and we love asking just like, I saw a podcast with Elon Musk and he was like, just keep asking like deeper and deeper questions of the interviewee and you'll really get to the answer. And that's something we definitely internalize because you want to know how much a person knows about what they worked on. Were they doing it end to end? Like that product engineer is gold. Somebody who can work with the customer, understand the problem, go tinker for a bit, and then come out with something that and show it to the customer and get the feedback, and then just understanding all those steps along the way. That's just like that's immensely powerful. And so to find people like that brings the company a really long way. Yeah, and I think we're very fortunate at Bola AI right now to have that as our engineering team.
That's awesome. I love that. I love the idea of just digging in deep to really validate that this person knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and
And
how do they think, right? Are they thinking of all the edge cases? Are they thinking forward? Are they thinking backward? Are they thinking of other stakeholders? You get a really good view into someone's brain by doing that.
yeah, how do you feel like it's worked? Have you had mostly successes in hiring, or have you had any false positives?
Yeah, we've had our fair share of false positives. And I think it's hard with remote as well. I think right as during an interview you've got maybe 3 hours, maybe you're doing 2 or 3 of those meetings, but you're trying to understand a person and how they're going to fit into your organization that's running in that small amount of time. And over Zoom it's really hard to meet someone. I think it's really hard to understand someone without really sitting down with them, shaking their hand. So that's definitely been a challenge post COVID, which has been the majority of our time.
I agree. So that's interesting. And once you do hire somebody, how do you think about helping them fit onto the team, or like, what kind of culture have you tried to set up within your product team?
Yeah, and so that's a great. So two things there. So number one, I think we really like to be explicit with the 30-day plan, and why we hired you. Like, hey, we hired you because we need help on the back end. This is a big project, and we want to get it out in 60 days, but we want to get you up to speed, and maybe at least this feature set would really prove that to us in 30 days. And kind of going at it as it's all of our goals to hit that 30-day mark. It's not just the new hires' goals to figure it out and get to that 30 days. It's everyone's goal to get the new engineering on board so we hit that 30-day goal. And so I think being super transparent about why you hired somebody and what you're expecting of them goes a really long way. And that goes back to the interview process as well. It's just being like, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is exactly where we're going to throw you on day one. And I think that's really helpful for people to understand as well, because they can self-select a little. If that doesn't sound interesting to them, that's probably good to know before their first day of work. So that's something we really try to do. And then on culture, it's funny you brought this up because, I mean, I've always known culture is one of the most important parts of the company, if not the biggest. But we haven't, right, we're smallish, on the smallish side. But we haven't really actively pursued the culture we want. And actually this quarter, we started building that out. We started positively reinforcing the things we want, negatively reinforcing the things we don't want. Doing a weekly culture exercise where we try and push the team into uncomfortable areas, talking about what they don't like people doing. Talking about what they like on the side, right? Super passionate about, I found out one of our teammates was super passionate about Halloween. It was basically her Christmas and she loved it and she like prepped for it for 3 months. But you get these insights into people and you really understand how to manage them. And that's actively doing culture is super important. And I just read like a funny quote the other day. It's like, your culture will happen. Like, regardless of whether you build it the way you want, or if you don't put any effort into it, you still have a culture, right? And then you want to shape that, of course, to be the culture you want. And then, I mean, most people say it. It's really hard to believe until you see it. But if you form the culture you want, you will get the numerical results you want. You will get the product out when you want. You will get the sales numbers to where you want them to be. as long as you form that culture correctly. And that's something extremely hard to understand because culture is like this soft thing that exists in the ether between people. And you're telling me that's going to drive my year. It's very hard to understand that way.
Yeah, and I like that. And one thing you said stuck out to me that's not as soft is like the incentive structure. And
Mhm.
when I say incentives, I mean both like, because you said, hey, we want to reinforce the behaviors that we want to encourage
Yeah.
and, provide some negative reinforcement for behaviors that we don't want. And that is
Mhm.
actually, you know, that can be maybe the backbone. Like, how much do you think that influences the culture versus like in my mind, the other big thing that influences culture is just like how the leaders act. So it's like who you
Yeah.
are as a leader sort of like trickles
Mhm.
down to some degree. So I don't know,
Mhm.
how do you think about those, balancing those, the incentives versus just the who your leaders are.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part about an incentive structure and a culture is you're basically putting out there what you want, which again is not an
Hmm.
obvious thing and should not be taken for granted. You're saying, hey, this is what in my mind a good team looks like. This is what good sales numbers look like. This is what a good product look like. And you're defining what's good. And ideally you're getting team input on that as well. Is like, hey, Rushi, you should probably have this thing too. It's also super important. Okay, let's add that in. And I think that's just step one is just defining good. Like this is what good looks like.
Hmm.
And then if you incentivize people properly, both kind of hard and soft, then you have that north star of where you want to get everyone to be. And I think that's probably the most important thing about leadership is communicating and over communicating and then over communicating again once you thought you've over communicated it what you want to get to. And it's because it's not obvious. Everyone's different, right? Every company is different. Every company has different wants. Every product is different. And just really communicating what that golden area looks like, that North Star, and then getting your team there and working with them to get there. And then it gives you that shared
Hmm.
language of, hey, we didn't do this one thing on the product. We launched a bunch of new features, but it broke. Okay, let's go back to what do we want, right? And it gives you that you can then diff it versus what you defined.
Hmm. So do you actually pay your engineers a variable compensation? Do they have like a variable compensation component that's based on some sort of like
No,
manager?
no, we don't. We do that for our sales team. Of course, the engineers do get stock in the company as well,
Hmm.
but we do not do a variable component for the engineers. I find most engineers are most motivated by building cool stuff. And they want to make sure they're building cool stuff, growing. Of course, with that comes growth in their. They want to do harder stuff. They want to do bigger projects. They want to manage projects. They want to, and of course, with that comes growth in base salary, but also just growth in their future. And one of the
Hmm.
things we're brutally honest here about is like I'm. It's okay for this company to be a stepping stone to your next company, to which will be a stepping stone to your next company. I'm 100% okay with it. We are just leasing you as an employee, is how we think about it. And so, look, you do
Hmm.
awesome and you grow. The company does awesome. The company grows. We all win. So let's work together to get there. Like you want to be a CTO in 5 years, okay? Maybe Bola's not where you're going to be the CTO, but let's get you there because all along the way, everyone's benefiting.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. So changing gears a little bit, I'd be interested to talk about your education, hear about what has worked really well for you, both in formal or informal education. I'm always curious to hear, like, what do you think about college? Did it help
Yeah,
you?
so yeah, I was of the opinion I did not love school. To be brutally honest, I did not love university. I did not love school. I think I would have liked it more if I actually studied software engineering and then did internships that related to my software engineering. I felt a lot of time doing electrical engineering undergraduate. It's very abstract. I mean, you're taking science classes for 2 years. Then in your third year, you're doing all the foundational courses. And then maybe in your fourth year, you're starting to do some application. And so you're
Hmm.
sitting there for like 3 years not understanding. Whereas I kind of learned the best backwards, being like, okay, this is the application, this is what we want to build, this is what I want to do. Okay, I can't do this part of it. Okay, let me go learn that part of it. Almost the reverse would have been more, I think, helpful for the way my brain thinks. But then, yeah, when I graduated and I started as a software engineer, I was fortunate enough to be in a middle-sized company with a great culture, and I think I was like their first junior hire, and so I got a lot of leeway in terms of like they gave me some like toy projects that ended up being important, but weren't important on day one. But I was really able to learn, and like I think my brain probably expanded the most it ever has in those like 2 years right out of college. Just like doing stuff and learning best practices and reading blogs. And I'm a little older, so YouTube videos weren't a thing when I was learning. But I've heard a lot of people nowadays love that way of learning as well.
Interesting. So would you ever recommend somebody not go to college and just go learn by doing, or do you think it's a cultural necessity, like a societal?
I kind of wish, I would say the best case for me personally would have been like after high school, working for a year or two as either a software engineer or just like
Mm,
in some almost industry. And that really just ignited the passion. And I think if I had done that, my grades would have been way better in college. But I also would have known what I wanted out of college, as opposed to just going to
mm-hmm.
college as like the next step. And so that would have been my ideal path looking back. And I did do that. Like once I was a software engineer, I did go back for my master's, and I was very clear of like I want to learn these things, and like I don't have a formal software
Mm-hmm.
engineering education, so like I want to get deep in these things. And that was way more successful, and it was just way more enjoyable too. Like I loved the classes I was taking. It was a way more enjoyable time. So I think there's, especially with everything out there nowadays and opportunities and information, I think the world is widening up to the possibilities and widening up to what a successful path looks like. And for us too, hiring wise, we, I mean, I think a bachelor's degree or a master's degree can help you get hired by us, but it's not a necessity, especially for software engineers. We have a software engineer who did not go to college, and he is fabulous. I was just actually on a call with him before this, congratulating him for some awesome work he did last week, and working with him to figure out how we need to do that every single week because our product would be 10 times better. And so I think non-traditional paths are definitely opening up, and I hope to see them be more common because I'm also curious about whether the system we have in place right now is the best system, the traditional one.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, and this has been great. Any final thoughts or questions here before we wrap up?
No, I think kind of I'm really eager to see the next uh, breed and next group of software engineers who come out because I think they're just going to be so much better than where I was at that age, and I think from already what I've seen, just starting earlier, more tech, more availability. I think it's really exciting where the industry is going.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And at Bcamp, we also question a little bit the traditional software engineering path, although I think, like you mentioned, or sorry, the traditional education path to become a software engineer. And like you mentioned, I think there's going to be different paths going, and like you can use any educational opportunity to help you. I really like what you said about wishing that you would have taken a year to go work and like
Hmm.
kind of figure out what direction you wanted to go in and then go to school. I think that's really good advice. It's kind of common sense, but I think it makes a lot of sense as well.
Yes, it's definitely non-traditional, but it makes sense, and I think it drives the passion of why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Rushi. Thank you for joining us, and it's been a pleasure, and it's so fun to hear about your story, about your company. We wish you the best. It sounds like you're doing great stuff, and yeah,
Thank
let's
you.
stay in touch.
Thank you, Richard, and all the best for the 2025.
Likewise.